Editing Adam here. Thank you very much for joining us for part two, and please enjoy. Which book disappointed you recently? I read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life not long ago, and I don't know what I was expecting from it, to be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of his work or anything, and I don't know. Like, when people talk about Peterson, they sort of big up his... your big ups, no. They sort of hype up his... because he was a clinical psychologist, they hype up that element of him. Even people that don't like him, they're like, oh, he says some crazy stuff over here, but his self-help stuff is really good. And while some of the advice was decent, I found most of it pretty common sense, which I think is kind of the point. I don't know whether or not it's just because I've read enough books on psychology or self-help that none of it sort of sparked me as new, whereas he sort of compiled it in an accessible way for people. I'm not really sure. I just didn't get anything out of it. I don't know. I don't even know what inspired me to read it in the first place, to be honest with you. He says some stuff. Anyway, let's not get into that. What are your pet peeves when it comes to romance writing? Unbelievable decisions. And this is why dark romance is a bit of a problem for me as well. I will get to that. But when people are presented with a person who does something so morally repugnant really early in their relationship, and then they make the decision to either continue pursuing that person because he's like so hot, or stuff like that, where you're just like, no, any human being on the face of the earth would turn and run. You need to create and craft your narrative in such a way that I believe this character wouldn't immediately turn tail and scarper for the hills. And the suspension of disbelief that I'm expected to suspend, I don't know. But, the level of suspension of disbelief is so high in some of these. It is pro wrestling grade. Undertaker shooting lightning bolts out his hand. I don't believe they would stay. And you've not set enough groundwork for me to ignore that. So that is an absolute pet peeve of mine. Name one author who is an auto-buy. Brandon Sanderson. I will definitely be doing some commentary on Sanderson probably relatively soon, where I talk about his later works and the increased need for understanding the broader cosmere and understanding things that you can't directly learn by reading his books. So I was reading the last in Era 2 of Mistborn, and it was the first time reading a Sanderson book where I felt like I missed parts of the story, not Easter eggs. I don't mind if I miss Easter eggs, but I honestly felt there were parts of the core story I didn't understand as well because I hadn't gone to his website and read the extended lore. However, having said that, I always find his books interesting. I always have a good time reading them, even though I'm worried that that is going to trend away if this sort of pattern keeps continuing. But Sanderson is an auto-buy for me. And, well, no, it very deliberately says not to cheat and have two. Matt Dinnerman, you almost made it. Let's see. How are you faring on your reading challenges? I'm about 10 books ahead at the moment, but I set a really modest goal with just about no parameters. So I set a goal of 52 books for the year. That is one book every week. And the only limitation on that is I'm not counting manga, which I think is fair enough because I can read a manga in about an hour. But I am counting novellas, I am counting books of poetry, I am counting things like epic poems. So I sat down and read The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which took me a little while. It was an illustrated copy, so it did take a little bit longer. and I am counting graphic novels. I'm just not counting manga volumes. And so that has given me a chance. I think I've read like 5 books under 150 pages or something this year. And so, yeah, I am a little bit ahead, probably mostly off the back of that. Other than that, I would probably be relatively on track. I think initially I set it for 1 book a fortnight, and I smashed that by like April. So April was a really good reading month for me. Yeah, so I am ahead with a little asterisk. Which book gave you the longest or hardest book hangover? Finishing The Count of Monte Cristo. It took me almost a year to the day, actually it was to the day, to finish reading The Count of Monte Cristo, believe it or not. And that was an ADD thing as well, where I kept picking the book up, reading like 10 chapters and putting it down. But reading The Count of Monte Cristo in 10 chapter batches means it's going to take you forever, and it did take me forever. And it was another one of those where I was really, really enjoying it. I can't honestly tell you why it took so long or why I kept putting it down and picking up other things, but, you know, shiny new thing, ooh. And so that one, when I finished reading The Count of Monte Cristo, I think it took me like a whole week to pick up something else. I don't know if it was Dungeon Crawler Carl. It might have been Dungeon Crawler Carl that sort of kicked me back off again once I got there. But it was just sort of such a monumentally epic thing to finish that I really had a hard time bringing myself back. Has social media, Instagram, Bookstagram, changed the way that you read? No, I do not have time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I am a teacher. I'm a father of 4. I am married. I barely have time to scratch my bum and wind my watch. So the only thing that BookTube, Bookstagram, BookTalk, all that sort of stuff has changed is that maybe I'm sacrificing a tiny bit of reading time in order to edit stuff. Barely. Yeah, I'm still reading at about the same pace I ever was. Although I do now have a TBR that's as long as my arm, which, although my arms aren't that long. Which book did you buy most recently, only based on the recommendations of Instagram, BookTalk? Dungeon Crawler Carl. I kept seeing it popping up. People kept recommending it to me. Everyone that... I didn't see a single person DNF it. I didn't see a single person not like it. So that was the recommendation. Good call. Are you part of any book clubs? What are you currently reading with them? I'm not, and I would like to be. It's one of those where do I find the time kind of things to gather and meet with people. This is probably where something like Storygraph or Goodreads book club might be a good thing, an online space. And that's certainly, well, I guess if you count Bookster as being its own giant book club, but I would really like to join a book club. So if you have any book clubs, please let me know. And how do you choose your next read? Vibes. I have planned out, and sort of the next question is, are you a planner or are you a mood reader? It's kind of the same question. So I'm going to answer 19 and 20 together. I make plans. I am a really big one for writing lists. I have drawn all over my hand in this process. I'm a big one for making lists and setting myself goals to read. And then I'm an even bigger one for completely ignoring the list, but keeping the number. So I think last month I set myself the goal of reading 6 books and getting to a certain volume number in One Piece. And I did read that number of books, if you count novellas and stuff, but they were different books than the ones I had written down and planned to read. I think I wanted to read the entire Farseer trilogy, and I ended up reading one of those, an extra Dungeon Crawler Carl that wasn't on my list, an extra book of poetry, Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mum Died, and that was purely because I looked at the title and giggled. So, yeah, that's the kind of person I am. So, plan big, don't follow through. Okay. What is your favorite mandatory read from a school syllabus? As a teacher, my favorite read on a syllabus was The Color of Water. Honorable mentions to The Cellist of Sarajevo, anything by William Shakespeare. I have a strong teacher bias. I don't like teaching Shakespeare. I think language is tricky enough without kids having to learn Middle English, although Shakespearean insults are fun. But he's a master storyteller. So I love Shakespeare stories. I do not like having to decode the language with students. So The Color of Water by James McBride, absolutely fantastic book, a wonderful exploration of race, culture, faith, family, all the rest of it. I absolutely recommend it as a teacher. As a student, there was a book called Walking Naked by Alyssa Brugman. She's, I assume, an Australian author. I actually don't know. I've never looked into her. She's got a couple of books. But I remember having to read a book called Walking Naked, which is kind of the popular girl is forced into a friendship with the school freakazoid. And I really enjoyed it. I still have a copy to this day on one of my bookshelves somewhere. And yeah, it's really good. If you've never read it, like, again, it probably has a bit of rose-colored glasses of being, oh my God, a school book I actually like. But I really enjoyed it then. I've reread it as an adult. I still like it now. The prose is not phenomenal, but it still had something in it for me. So I really like that. Do you sneak a peek into the last chapter? No. I avoid spoilers like the plague. The sole exception to that being with manga, where people can tell me all sorts of stuff about what happens at the end because the names are in Japanese. I speak enough Japanese to know some keywords, but I'm definitely not going to remember Japanese names. And so I think someone told me that X character died in One Piece at some point, and luckily by the time I got there, I'd completely forgotten because when they said it, it was not something, it's not like John Smith or something I was going to lock in. So no, I do not. Name the mandatory read that you disliked at school. I really didn't like Educating Rita. I think there's a movie with like Michael Caine in it, maybe, where this sort of, what's the word? I can't remember. Like this British woman goes to like adult school and this guy teaches her about poetry and stuff. I just remember thinking it was really boring, although the woman who played Rita in the film adaptation that they made me watch, I remember thinking that she was hilarious and that I really liked her. And I think it was Michael Caine, being the sort of suave English teacher, did a good job there too. So maybe the film was better than the book. Anyway, the point is I thought it was really boring. If you can add one book to the school mandatory read book list, which one would that be? I both can and have. Benefits to being an English teacher, I get to pick books sometimes. Sometimes there are ones I have to pick from, but sometimes I get to pick. And I picked Mouse by Art Spiegelman, adding both a graphic novel, which is more accessible to some of my students who aren't big readers, and adding a way for students to accessibly understand the Holocaust, which is I'm teaching it right this very minute, and it's such a heavy topic and so hard to access that Mouse sort of gives young people a way to get through that door without it being inaccessible to them. And do you read dystopia? Final question. If yes, name one dystopian fantasy that you can relate to our current world. Most of them, to be honest with you. I think you have... Sorry, I was going to say WALL-E. I was watching that with one of my classes the other day as a way of looking at visual storytelling. Anyway, the one I'm going to go with is The Handmaid's Tale. And the reason that I link The Handmaid's Tale, obviously you have the nature of feminism and women's equality and all that kind of stuff, which is I hope a slow slope in the right direction. But ultimately, the main thing that I draw from The Handmaid's Tale, which is fantastic, by the way, that any of our rights that we think are safe, and every time we tell ourselves that it's okay because X, Y, or Z could never happen, never take that for granted. The Handmaid's Tale shows us a perfectly plausible sequence of circumstances, if a bit extreme, but like a plausible sequence of circumstances where those rights can be eroded, taken away, and sometimes we won't notice it until it's already happened. So that we should be vigilant and we should be very cautious in what we allow our leaders to do, what rights and freedoms we allow them to strip from us. And we need to be very cautious with them, particularly when it comes to protecting people who already don't have the structural power to protect themselves. That's a very important thing. All right, so that's the end of the list, 25 questions. And I look forward to getting these out and having a chat and seeing what you guys think. So please like, share, follow, whatever else people do on these platforms. But the engagement would really help. And I am really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you very much.